Good evening or good morning at whatever time that you are listening to this. My name is Rimamnde Shawulu. This is The Other Side. A video started circulating on Thursday evening in which Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, Alhaji Shettima Kashim, praised the Attorney General of former President Goodluck Jonathan for standing up to tell President Goodluck Jonathan that even if he declares a state of emergency, he could not tell a governor to leave his seat. Now, it is strange coming from the vice president of a government that decided to suspend a sitting governor from office in pursuance of a state of emergency. Now, hear the vice president.
The last 4 years of the Jonathan administration, I was the most demonized person. I was the public enemy number one. And there are two gentlemen seated here. Certain decisions are taken in a very rare peace cycle. The president, the vice president, the Senate president, and the Speaker of the House of Representatives. At one of such conclaves, former President Goodluck Ebele Jonathan GCFR, with whom we have shared the sword and have now recalibrated our relationship, was mooting the idea of removing this Borno governor, and Aminu Tambuwal, the then Speaker of the House of Representatives, had the courage to tell the President that, Your Excellency, you don't have the power to remove an elected councillor. The President was still not convinced. He mooted the idea at the Federal Executive Council. I admire Mr. Mohammed Bello Adoke fundamentally for his courage and for his convictions and for his capacity to stand for what he believes in. He told the then president that, Mr. President, you do not have the power to remove a sitting governor, not even a councillor. They sought for the opinion of another SAN in the cabinet, Kabiru Turaki, who said, I am concurring with the opinion of my senior colleague. That was how the matter was laid to rest, but that was how my relationship with Mr. Bello Adoke and Aminu Tambuwal became eternally sealed.
Well, as you can hear from there, the vice president is pressing the former Speaker of the House of Representatives and former Governor of Sokoto State, the Right Honorable Waziri Aminu Tambuwal, for standing up to tell President Goodluck Jonathan that he had no powers under the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria to remove a sitting governor, not even a councillor, according to the vice president. Now, this is very strange because it's coming just at the heels of the fact that the government which he, Alhaji Shettima Kashim, is the vice president of, decided to put the whole democratic structure of River State in abeyance, in suspension, because of a state of emergency, which, according to the government, was a result of the threats of a breakdown of law and order. Now, the question to ask, is everything well with the vice president and his boss, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu? Are things falling apart? Why is the vice president praising uh, the former speaker, who is one of the leading lights of the coalition that was set up to ensure that the government which he, the vice president, is part of, is removed from office in the 2027 elections. Let me have your views on what is happening. Do you think that things are falling apart with between the vice president and his boss, or is it just the fact that he believes that the action that was taken by the government, which he's part of, was not according to law? But that is not the only problem that is facing the All Progressive Congress today. The news came up some days ago, or yesterday, Wednesday, at a public function too, where the former secretary to the government of the federation under President Muhammadu Buhari, that is Barrister Boss Mustapha, went to the public at the public ceremony to say that the contribution of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu to President Muhammadu Buhari's victory was not very important. Let's take a look at some of the news reports that came up.
In the keynote address, a former secretary to the government of the Federation commends the former president for laying the foundation of reforms for President Bola Tinubu. He makes clarifications on the roles played by Mr. Buhari in the emergence of his predecessor.
When you sum up the total votes that gave us the presidency in 2015, the aggregate of the total votes were 15.4 million votes. So basically, what we brought to the table, the other parties that were in the merger, in addition to Buhari's 12.2 million votes, were 3.2 million votes.
Beyond the unveiling.
Well, of course, the presidency fired back immediately. According to Premium Times, the presidency faulted the position of the former secretary to the government of the federation, and according to the newspaper, without the contribution of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, there's no way that President Muhammadu Buhari would have won the primaries in the first place. And of course, did not end there. The Guardian newspaper also came up with a report that some Yoruba youths under the aegis of Yoruba Social Cultural Association on Thursday berated the immediate past secretary to the government of the Federation, Barrister Boss Mustapha, for diminishing the contribution of the defunct Action Congress of Nigeria, ACN, and President Bola Ahmed Tinubu to the 2015 victory of former President Muhammadu Buhari. And the papers were, of course, some supporters of the president are very angry that that did happen, that such could be contemplated. Well, it's obvious that even if this were the case, that was not the thinking of the President Muhammadu Buhari's government from the beginning, because President Bola Ahmed Tinubu was made and called the national leader of the APC until the election, when the former president, began to frown at having a second national leader when he was as the president should have been regarded as the leader of the APC. But of course, the efforts that the current president, made to the victory of President Muhammadu Buhari may actually be more than is being admitted today, partly because it is obvious from some of the revelations that were made by one of the closest associates of President Muhammadu Buhari, that is Buba Galadima, was that President Muhammadu Buhari had decided he was no longer going to contest until President Bola Ahmed Tinubu came to him and gave him hope that he could contest election and win, and put his structure behind him, and he did win the election. Now let's take a look at how electoral figures have been, how elections have taken place in the last few years since 1999 in Nigeria. And if you look at the statistics of how elections have taken place, both sides are right, both sides are not right. Let's take a look at some of the statistics that we have of the 20 of the elections, all the election seasons that we've had. If you look at the screen, you see that President Muhammadu Buhari contested election in 2003, 2007, 2011, and 2015. He lost in 2003, 2007, and 2011, and only won the election when President Bola Ahmed Tinubu gave him the support. But of course, you could also argue that in 2007, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu actually supported Vice President Atiku Abubakar to contest the election, and Vice President Atiku Abubakar lost the election. As well, in 2011, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu supported the current National Security Advisor, Malam Nuhu Ribadu, to run against President Goodluck Jonathan. And of course, the support that President Bola Ahmed Tinubu gave was not enough for the current National Security Advisor Nuhu Ribadu to win the election. Meaning, therefore, that the election that saw the victory of President Muhammadu Buhari could not have been as a result of the actions of the current president alone. Of course, let's look at the famous 12 million votes that both the supporters of President Muhammadu Buhari and supporters of Vice President and President Bola Ahmed Tinubu claim that President Muhammadu Buhari has. We take a look at the time President Muhammadu Buhari started contesting election, that is the year 2003 elections. If let's scroll down to the final summary of the elections. If you check the votes that President Muhammadu Buhari received in his ANPP in 2003, he got 12 million votes, and President Obasanjo of the PDP got 24 million votes. If in 2007, when President Muhammadu Buhari contested against President Umaru Musa Yar'Adua, the PDP still retained its 24 million votes, and President Muhammadu Buhari, then candidate General Muhammadu Buhari, scored only 6.6 million votes. If we go down to 2011, when he contested against President Goodluck Jonathan, his votes came up again to 12.2 million votes, and President Goodluck Jonathan's votes went down to 22.4 million votes. In 2015, when President Goodluck Jonathan was defeated, the votes of President Muhammadu Buhari went up to 15.4 million votes, and Jonathan's votes went down to 12.8 million votes. And this could be accounted from the fact that the votes of President Goodluck Jonathan reduced drastically in the south, south, and southeast because the voters' turnout was very low, or that because of the card reader, the votes from those areas were unusually lower than all the votes that had been cast in those areas before, whereas the votes from the mainly northern states remained the same, largely the same. If you go down to 2019, when President Muhammadu Buhari ran against Atiku Abubakar, the votes of President Muhammadu Buhari went up to remained at 15 million, actually lower than the votes that he scored in 2015. And then the votes of Atiku Abubakar came to 11.2 million votes. And if you go down to the 2023 elections, you will discover that though the voters' turnout had reduced very drastically compared to other years, the election results were quite different, the type that Nigeria had not seen before. And the votes that it became a three-way race between President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, Governor Peter Obi, and Vice President Atiku Abubakar. And like I said in an earlier podcast, it was an election in which the person who won the overall election scored the least votes in Nigeria's political history. That is scoring about 37% of the votes, and the number of people that voted in that 2023 election was also the lowest that Nigeria had witnessed. I think about 27% only of Nigerians voted in that election. And so we'll come back to the point. Is it really fair for the supporters of President Muhammadu Buhari to say that without Tinubu, he would not have won the elections? Well, like I said before, we are going into interesting times in Nigeria's politics. There are movements not just in the opposition, People's Democratic Party, whose members have split into two camps, those remaining within the PDP and saying they will support the APC, and those who say they have gone to the ADC, and some that say they will remain in the PDP and work for the ADC. And as well, we are hearing now what the vice president is saying. What do you think is happening? Is the APC also about to implode? Let me have your views and your comments. Your views are welcome, and I'd like you to join our channel so that you have exclusive materials, including the data that we have on election process in Nigeria, the data that we use in the podcast that we are doing. This will only be available to people who join as members of the channel. However, you can still subscribe if you have not subscribed, and follow the channel and see all the free videos that we will be posting. Again, my name is Rimamnde Shawulu. This is The Other Side.